Morning, everyone. So it's two things today. It's first of all 4 years exactly since the last general election, and Rishi Sunak has chosen to commemorate the day of their large majority by seeing if they can move on to a fourth leader in that time. Because if his vote fails today, and it's very much in the balance, and it's clear it's in the balance, because I've just seen this morning, Rishi Sunak invited 15 MPs representing the right of the party to breakfast. It included Jonathan Gullis and Lee Anderson, as well as some that you would more readily recognisable as leaders of the far right, such as Miriam Cates and Danny Kruger. And so it is very much in the balance. Now, there's a lot of positioning and strategy involved here. And the problem with trying to unpick it all is we're talking about people adopting strategies who are not very good at strategy. So let's think through the various scenarios. If Rishi Sunak fails to get his bill, it's the second reading today. So the way this bill is supposed to work, if it were to pass, is the second reading is today. There will, of course, be a debate. That debate will be ordinarily, with debates, you sort of expect there to be arguments between the two sides of the House. On this occasion, there'll be arguments on one side of the House. There will be Tories attacking Tories on this debate. So then the idea is if it passes, it goes to what's called the committee stage. Can Sunak pull the bill? Oh, yeah, he can pull the bill, but he doesn't intend to. He would only pull the bill if he was definitely going to lose. But we will see. Yes, he can pull it right at the last minute, no problem. But if it passes, goes to committee, then it will be scrutinized publicly in committee. There'll be lots of experts who will give their views on it. So any nonsense that Rishi Sunak's trying to claim about the bill, if independent experts don't say this, because they're going to be asked about it in committee, and people can suggest amendments to the bill. Right. So the right wing, who represent about 115 MPs, but it is spread across different factions. Remember, so although we say there's about 115-ish reportedly, what you might call far right Tory MPs, they're not a united group. They're warring tribes. And so, yeah, but there are still plenty of them. They could sink this bill today. You only need about 40 to vote against it, 30 to 40 to vote against it, possibly, depending on how many opposition MPs abstain or vote for it. So they could stop it today. If they do, the Rwanda plan is in difficulty. Rishi Sunak would have to say he'd have to come up with another plan. In the meantime, his main policy is going nowhere. That is curtains for a government, really. It should then mean either a new leader or an election. But there's another reasoning as well. So let's imagine the scenario. So imagine these two wings of the Tory party, the One Nation Tories, who are a bit more united, although they're very weak. Then you've got the far right, who are much more robust in their protests, but they're more disparate as well. So the far right, let's say they sink his bill today. And let's say it forces a new leader. And let's say they get their choice of new leader appointed. Priti Patel, Suella Braverman, whoever, right? What's to stop the moderate wing of the party saying, well, you only changed leader because of dirty tactics. We can use the same tactics against you. So what's to stop moderate Tories then voting against the new leader's legislation? So you could end up with a situation where even a change of leader will actually still only make things worse, no matter who wins it. So the far right are thinking, the ones who can think, it would be better to let the bill go through today so that, sorry, I should pour myself a drink, so that they can amend it at the committee stage. So then what will happen is committee will take its hearings, find its evidence, publish its evidence. Amendments will be proposed. They'll be discussed as well. Then sometime next month will be the plan. There'll be the third reading in the House of Commons because Rishi Sunak wants it. He says he wants it done quickly. So next month in the new year, there'll be the third reading. And if the far right have been able to get any amendments together, they will put those to a vote. If the vote fails, they have the option of then voting down the entire bill. It doesn't ever go to the House of Lords. If the vote succeeds, the House of Lords will block it, right? Sunak doesn't necessarily mind that because what Rishi Sunak will then do is say that Labour blocked it with unelected Lords against the elected MPs. So he'll create a little bit of a, oh, this is Labour's fault that the votes aren't being stopped type of thing. So Rishi Sunak won't mind that at all. At the same time, it won't help him get his bill through Parliament either because it will have been blocked. So he's then still back to square one, albeit he will just be blaming Labour for it. If the bill is blocked by the far right of his party, he can try blaming Labour, but ultimately it will be a majority Tory government failing to get its majority in there. And if the far right do defeat the bill, whether it's today or whether it's next month, it will be because they want to oust him as leader. So they will also be prepared to block other legislation as well. So that is the sort of situation they're in. Now, I did have one other thought, which is, let's say the far right allow the bill through today, amend it, and let's say the rest of the Tories allow them to amend it, knowing full well it'd be blocked in the Lords. And then the Lords, once they have said, no, this isn't going to fly, the Sunak and the moderate Tories can say to the far right, well, our bill would have gone through, but you insisted on these amendments. We went with them. We went, okay, we'll give it a go. We thought it was wrong. And now you've ended up with it being blocked in the Lords. So Sunak will publicly attack Labour for blocking it in the Lords, but privately say to the right of his party, you have screwed this up. So we're going to have to leave it for now, and it's all your fault. So there could be a bit of that going on. It's just, I'm not sure Rishi Sunak's really got the bollocks to face down the far right with something like that. So we will see. But anyway, let's go through some comments because it is all incredibly complicated, this. Captain Bartlett saying, I watched that Tice interview this morning. Deluded doesn't begin to describe the man well enough. Well, there's a sense in which he's deluded, and there's also a sense in which he's just conning people as well. There are things he genuinely doesn't understand. Don't get me wrong, but a lot of the things he talks about, he does understand. He just pretends not to for political purposes. Richard Tice is basically a landowner who wants to make lots of money. And that's the entire purpose of Reform UK. It is to force the government to favour the ultra-wealthy, the people who own things. Tinkin, £85 super chat, thank you very much. DRC and Rwanda could be about to go to war over the conflict in North Kivu and Tory. Won't this derail any pretense that this plan could work? There isn't really much of a pretense. I mean, what you have is you've got a group of people in the country. There are people. I talked to one on Friday. It's quite incredible what some of these people, and but there are some of these people who buy into all these lies. But it is. It's not a small minority of the population, but it is a minority. And the most important thing for the Tories is it's not a section of the voter base that they should be treating as that important to them. And I'm not saying, oh, they can ignore these votes being lost. It's like, no, well, it is going to hurt them, but they can't get those votes back. The problem with the Tories chasing after these people who find Reform UK's ideas appealing is, first of all, you're talking about demographics that don't vote in as larger numbers as the ones they should be chasing. Second of all, a lot of those people see the Tories failing. Even if this Rwanda bill passes, it doesn't do anything other than undermine the rule of law further, but it still doesn't get them what they want. It doesn't affect anything. It's not going to reduce channel crossings. Like Keir Starmer was saying today, you're talking about sending 100 refugees out of the 160,000 backlog. That's not going to do anything. And as for this, and this guy I was talking to on Friday, I say talking to, he was like huffing and puffing because he didn't like someone telling him he was wrong. Before he just pissed off and said, "Oh, do your research." Do your research, and then he buggered off before I could say to him, "Mate, my research is from the Home Office, from the Office for National Statistics. Where's yours? The Sun and the Daily Mail, but or Facebook." But anyway, he believed this deterrent effect. It's like 100 people out of like tens of thousands. How's that a deterrent? And I said, first of all, the people coming across in the small boats, because they are mostly fleeing persecution and war, they don't know about this policy anyway. Who's going to tell them? Who's going to tell them this policy? Like, if this person had stuck around to actually listen to my argument, I'd have said to him, can you tell me what the asylum policy is for, say, Morocco? He wouldn't be able to tell me, would he? So I was thinking, so if you don't know the asylum policies of like a North African country, how on earth do you think people from Central Africa know what the UK asylum policies are? Like, people don't really know the finer points of policy of other countries. They don't really know that much. So who's going to tell them? And also, even if they knew about it, how bad would their maths have to be to think, right, there's about 45,000 people came across last year in the UK, and they're planning on sending 100 of them to Rwanda. Like, yeah, I'd fancy those chances, wouldn't you? And he kept going, oh, they're all economic migrants. And again, he didn't stick around for me to say, okay, so economic migrants, if they are, and some of them are actually don't have a genuine claim. Some of them fail their claim. So if they go to Rwanda and they're processed and the Rwandan government says, yeah, these aren't asylum seekers, they come back. We still have to deal with them. It's absolute nonsense. Anyway, right, on to some other ones. If the UK is accepting asylum seekers from Rwanda and Rwanda is now a safe country by law, doesn't that create a precedent that the UK accepts asylum seekers from safe countries now? That'd be an interesting one. The thing is, though, that argument won't work because the government are denying that we will be accepting any refugees from Rwanda. Although the deal says that we will, when the government were asked about this, they said, oh, no, it's just there to make sure that there's no take-backsies. But in reality, no, I've read the deal several times. But they're denying it. So the argument doesn't work because you will not get the Tories to say, on the one hand, Rwanda is a safe country, and on the other hand, we're going to accept asylum seekers from Rwanda. So no, that one won't work, I'm afraid. But there's plenty that do work. There's plenty of nonsense in this. Like, it has been pointed out, the deal, for example. So first of all, in fact, even Dan Hodges of the Mail was saying this, but he tweets it. He won't write it in the Mail. But even he was saying this. He was saying, look, so here's the thing, right? Brexit was all supposed to be about giving British courts powers and stuff like that. What this Rwanda bill does, right, is it says that we should be able to ignore the British court, the UK Supreme Court, right? That's what this bill does. It says we should be able to ignore the British courts, but we can't ignore the European Court of Human Rights, and we can't ignore the courts in Rwanda. So basically what this bill does is say that we should ignore British courts, but not courts that are based overseas. I won't use the word foreign courts there because remember, the European Court of Human Rights is not a foreign court. It's just one that's based overseas. It's an international court of which we're a member, so it's not foreign to us. But the Rwandan courts are foreign to us, and they get more say than our British courts with this bill over who gets sent to Rwanda. I mean, that is the reality of the situation. The Rwandan courts have more of a say over our asylum policy than the British courts. But so, yeah, the whole thing is a complete nonsense. Why is Labour not replying saying the Tories do hold a majority? It seems so obvious. I hope they do if it comes to it. I mean, at the moment, Rishi Sunak hasn't actually in Parliament, as far as I can tell. He hasn't done the Theresa May yet. Theresa May in 2019, whenever she failed to get her bill through again, kept saying to Jeremy Corbyn, "Oh, it's all your fault for not voting for it." And Rishi Sunak hasn't done that yet because the vote hasn't taken place. So if the vote does take place, and then in PMQs tomorrow, there is a PMQs tomorrow. I think he's not out of the country, is he? So in PMQs tomorrow, then, you know, if Rishi Sunak tries saying, well, you should have voted, however the result goes, you should have voted for it because you don't want to stop the votes. Starmer then gets the opportunity to say exactly that. Who's given evidence at the inquiry today? Do you know what? I haven't even noticed because the big news is whether Rishi Sunak's even Prime Minister at the end of this week. I mean, he will still be Prime Minister at the end of this week, I suppose, technically, but, you know, is he stable as Prime Minister? That's what we need. That's what we need to know. That is going to be made. I mean, as I say, the two main things today are 4th anniversary of that 2019 general election win, for which I have done a video on my own channel, and this vote, which is, you know, is a vote where Rishi Sunak has basically cornered himself. Again, it's the opposite of political strategy to create a situation whereby your main platform policy requires a vote in Parliament that you cannot be sure of getting through. I mean, I'll tell you how, again, I'll go back to the fact we know that Rishi Sunak is not confident today because he's had to have breakfast with Lee Anderson and Jonathan Gullis. That's how bad things are for Rishi Sunak. He's actually had to suffer their company. Is it my equipment that's feel very fuzzy and pixelated? It sort of looks like that on mine a little bit as well. I'm not sure if there's an issue with the streaming on Graham's end, I'm afraid. But yeah, so in terms of the COVID inquiry, at the moment, it's like, it's sort of almost on a back burner because I'll keep a weather eye on it when it's happening. But you've got, what have we got? We've got the 4th anniversary of the general election. We've got the Rwanda plan shenanigans, and there's a lot. You could do a full week's worth of content just on all the ifs and buts and twists and turns on the Tory infighting, because like I say, you've I mean, if you think about it from a Tory MP's point of view, they've got now limited time. They're going to lose the next election. Some of them think that a different I mean, they are all accepting that they're going to lose the general election under Rishi Sunak. I mean, how can you not? Let me see if I can put something up. Hold on. This might go a bit wrong because we don't get the full thing on here. But let's see how well this works. Can I put that up there? And let's see if that works. And what you've got, because I'm having to wait for it to come up to see if it's even worked or not, is if you look at the polling trend, this is the poll of polls that I've stuck up, which is, it averages out all the major pollsters. It's not an accurate one because some pollsters are just crap, but it does sort of seem to work. I just need to move it back a bit. If you look at the gap there between Labour and the Conservatives, it's not just that it's this big gap, and it's not just that it's been going on for a while. If you look back over the previous, I mean, this goes back to 2010, there have been gaps like that in the past with Conservatives leading over Labour, but not for this period of time, not for this long. You just look at how long that gap has been there, and it's not really moving. You can see lots of ups and downs, but it's not really moving. And that ultimately is the problem. It's they're not going to win the election, certainly not under Sunak. There's no way of saying they're going to win the election under Sunak like that. I'll get rid of that now because I've shown that. And so some of them will think that they might be able to win it with a different leader. So that encourages them to try and get a different leader. Some of them, I've seen the suggestion that they could do it as damage limitation. So I've seen suggestions from some Tory MPs via correspondence, all anonymous. I don't know their names or how many think this. Some of them think that it won't actually make any difference having another leader. They know they're going to lose the election. But if they get rid of Sunak and get a new leader in, they'll get a honeymoon period bounce, then go to the polls before they lose that honeymoon period. And they see that as damage limitation. They see getting rid of Sunak, even if they don't think there's anyone better, just the fact that it's a clean slate again, and they'll still lose, but they'll not lose as badly. So there's some that think that as well. In reality, it's all very risky. Have I seen the polling say the lead is only 11 points? YouGov source. No, that's not true. Delta poll have produced an 11-point lead for Labour. Delta poll are one of the very worst. Of all these sorts of major pollsters, most of them are really terrible. Delta poll are awful. In fact, basically, the only pollsters that you should, if you're going to look at an individual pollster, the only one on voting intention, this is not to say that they don't know how to do any sort of poll. Voting intention polls are probably the most difficult type of poll you can do, right? Especially for a first past the post system. The only ones that are even vaguely credible are Ipsos, YouGov, and Opinion. None of the rest. The rest of them were all crap, right? Some of their other polling might be all right, although Delta poll is just universally terrible. Delta poll, like when I found out that when I asked Stella Creasy, who is the Labour MP, who's chair of the Labour Movement for Europe, and she said that they use Delta poll for their polling, my face fell. It fell. It's like saying to someone, you know, it's like, have you got a plan to get down this cliff? Hoping they've got a load of abseiling equipment. They say, yeah, I'm just going to jump and hope for the best. It's like, oh, okay. But yeah. Serendipity Journey says they're so fractured now as a party that I can't imagine any one of them could unite the party. No, they absolutely can't. Which is a good thing for us. But no, they're completely, like, I would still say, I actually discussed this a week or two ago. I am still curious as to whether they are fundamentally unleadable. It's difficult to say because Sunak is not a leader. Liz Truss was not a leader. Boris Johnson was not a leader. So they haven't actually had a leader in charge of them. Actually, since they've been in government, they haven't actually had any strong leaders. So it's not actually, I don't actually know whether it's possible or not, because I would still say, so what if they got a leader who came in and then put legislation that was in the manifesto? Because this is what I would have argued Sunak should have done when a year ago. One of his first acts as leader and prime minister was to pull a bill on housing targets, but that was in their manifesto. What he should have done is said to, because he was relatively safe at the time, there was no way they were going to force another leadership contest. Then what he should have said is, you campaigned for this, you all campaigned for this, it's in the manifesto. And he should have taken the attitude, he should have tried to be strong, he should have taken the attitude. He says, any Tory MP who votes against a manifesto promise is not a Tory MP, you'll lose the whip. That's what he should have said. He said, I'm not messing about here. It's one thing if you don't like a bill that isn't part of the manifesto, but when it comes to a manifesto promise, you campaign for it, you're going to vote for it. And if you don't vote for it, you can join Labour on the opposition benches. He should have done that. And he could have afforded to remove the whip off quite a lot of MPs. And then he'd have stamped his mark. He'd have been like, and he'd have been saying, he could say to them, I can call an election whenever I like. He should have been. Basically, what Tories want in a leader is a right bastard. That's what they want. That's what they respect. And that's what he should have been. So when we say they're completely disunited and no one's going to be able to lead them, of the possible leaders, well, you say not since Thatcher, John Major was a strong leader. Remember what John Major did. He actually faced down the rebels on multiple occasions. Didn't do them any good. They still ended up losing the election. But he faced them down because there were rebellions against John Major. Remember, John Redwood at the time was leading those. And he faced them down. Whereas since then, who have they had? I mean, we don't really know. Like, about, if you look at leaders since, William Hague, he didn't really face a rebellion, so we don't really know. Ian Duncan Smith faced a rebellion and he went. Michael Howard didn't really face a rebellion. David Cameron didn't really face a rebellion. So we don't really know. We can't, although we know David Cameron cut and run after the Brexit thing. So again, we can say he was not a strong leader either. But there you go. Colin's saying, if Delta gives Labour the smallest lead, following them will stop the party getting complacent. Well, Labour just, it doesn't matter what the lead is. They just need to imagine that they're slightly ahead anyway. They need to behave as if they're just enough ahead. That's what you do. It's the same in sport, isn't it? If you're playing football and you're winning by 3 goals, you just treat it as if you're winning by 1 goal. You don't treat it as if you're behind, because that, you know, what you need to do when you're behind is fundamentally different to ahead. You don't adopt a we're behind strategy when you're ahead. That would be foolish. But there is a certain element of being defensive when you're ahead. But you don't behave as if you're way, because the problem with thinking, oh, we're way ahead, and there's lots of people argue this. They'll say something like, oh, well, what we should do then is there's loads of these policies we've got that we're only really doing for strategic benefit. We don't need them all because we're so far ahead. We can afford a few better policies that aren't as attractive. But as soon as you start doing that, then you start losing your poll lead. So no, they absolutely need to maintain what they can. Stephanie saying that's why Thatcher was so revered. She was an absolute bastard. Well, she was revered because she won elections. Boris Johnson's revered because he won election, and he won an election. You know, that's all there is to it. David Cameron to a lesser extent, because he also did cut and run, but he still won them an election. Whereas, but they nonetheless, that is the only type of leader that they really respect is a complete bastard. So that's what they need, but they're not going to get it. Because if you look at the available options to replace Sunak, what have we got in terms of the names that keep coming up? Kemi Badenoch. We don't know a great deal about her, but I don't get the impression she's going to be very strong. She's certainly not experienced. James Cleverly, we know he's weak. Penny Mordaunt, she can hold a sword. She's not going to use the sword on them. She's not even going to threaten them with a sword. So she's not going to be that right little bastard. Suella Braverman is a bastard, but she's not strong. She's weak as well and incompetent. Priti Patel, also weak and incompetent. Like, they don't have anyone who would be prepared to face down a major rebellion. But it is what it is. We sort of run out of time again. Let's go through the last few ones. She wasn't known as the Iron Lady for nothing. No, she was wow. But again, notice, so she was a strong leader for a time, but notice a couple of things. First of all, early on, like when we think of her now as what she did against workers, you know, particularly against the mining strikes, she wasn't actually intending to do that to begin with. She was too afraid. And then there was a particular incident where a business owner faced down a strike action, and that sort of emboldened her a bit. But notice later on they ditched her. They were totally ruthless. She was still the same strong leader, but they were totally ruthless and they deposed her. Why? Because she was going to lose the election. So ultimately, the reason they revered her was because she was an election winner, not because she was a bastard. But the fact that she was a bastard is what helped keep her party in line. Nigel Davenport, thank you there. $20 there. Thank you very much. Super chat. But there we go. So we'll leave it there. We will find out later on today. I have a sneaking suspicion it will get through, because it doesn't make strategic sense for the far right to sink it today, because they haven't even, remember, there's like multiple factions. There's like half a dozen factions on the right. They haven't agreed who their common candidate is. If they force a leadership contest before they're ready, before they've got someone, then there's actually a strong chance that it ends up being someone who they're not supporting. So they end up with someone from their point of view just as bad as Sunak, right? So if they want their candidate to have a realistic shot, they have to agree. They all have to get behind the same candidate. Because if you've got 115 MPs who all agree to get behind the same candidate, there is a very, very good chance indeed. In fact, it's almost certain that they will get them on the final ballot. So they need to agree. They need to agree. But there we are anyway. Thank you very much for coming on. Don't forget to click the like button, of course, and to subscribe to the channel. We'll keep an eye on the vote later today. No doubt there'll be an update to later on. And until next time, I'll see you later.